Hello everybody, welcome back to the second half of today's conference. It's time now for session 3, where we'll look at what broadcaster and auto manufacturers are doing at the moment to design a truly listener-centric digital radio experience. And I'm joined now in the studio by Laurence Harrison, who's Director of Automotive Partnerships at Radioplayer Worldwide, and Nick Piggott, who is the Project Director at RadioDNS. Two familiar faces to many of you, I'm sure. Hello, Laurence and Nick, great to have both of you here with us. Laurence, I know you've been watching everything that we've been broadcasting this morning. What are your thoughts on what you've seen so far?
Well, I think Patrick talked about the importance of collaboration. I think that's one of the things that WorldDAB is great at, and it's the breadth of speakers. But I think two things in particular have stood out for me. One was, I think, what Martin Koch was saying about the work that WorldDAB is doing, the importance of the user experience and some of the dashboard trends that mean we need to work hard to keep radio prominent. And the second one is the introduction of new technology, such as Android Automotive, and that's something that I'm going to touch on when I speak.
And Nick, what have been your key takeaways, the most interesting things that you've seen so far?
Probably very similar to what Laurence has just spoken about. There is such a lot of opportunity to make radio look so much better in vehicles. There's functionality available to broadcasters. Broadcasters can do more things to make their radio stations look great and sound great. So that seems like a lot of really exciting opportunities to get into.
Yeah, I agree with both of you there. It's clear that the listener has got to be at the heart of everything that we do. And this session coming up is looking at designing a listener-centric digital radio experience, as well as understanding where and how DAB+ is being implemented by both car manufacturers and broadcasters. So don't forget to post your questions in on the message wall for our speakers coming up, both now and later on today. We'll be having a look at those later on. First, though, let's hear from Vlastimil Navratil, Group Manager of Skoda Auto, discussing DAB+ in the small to mid-range vehicles. And he's interviewed by our very own Chairman of the Automotive Group, Martin Koch from Cariad.
It's a pleasure for me to talk again. And where I this morning was focusing on the future of infotainment and how this becomes real even today in the premium segment of the cars. In this session, we will concentrate more on the volume segment of the car market, talking about the small and mid-sized cars. And what's interesting for me as well is how do these cars today offer DAB technology and user experience. And since I'm not an expert on that, I'm very happy to see Vlastimil Navratil, my dear colleague from Skoda Auto, in the line, and have a great interview to learn more about this. Hello, Vlastimil.
Yeah, hello, Martin. Good afternoon, everybody. As was said, my name is... Hi.
Sorry, so Vlastimil, who our audience might not know you, so my first question is, tell us a little bit about your job and what you're doing within Skoda.
Yeah, I'm a group leader of a department at Technical Development Center at Skoda Auto, where my team is, besides other things like antennas and sound system, responsible for analog, digital, and online radio implementation also in our cars. Yeah.
Fantastic. So what are the systems, so the overall infotainment systems your team is currently working on?
Yeah, in general, we are profiting from the module-based infotainment within VW Group. Like other car manufacturers, also we have more level offering concept for infotainment, high level infotainment with navigation and online connectivity features, web apps or web radio, as was mentioned also in the past. And in addition, also low-level infotainment. This is, let's say, my focus, where we are offering the AM/FM, of course, DAB features. We will talk later about more details. Multimedia phone content, and also the wireless smart link, which is also mentioned in the morning session. And Skoda is responsible for development of this low-level infotainment system for VW Group. Our system.
So this means, as you mentioned, the module strategy for our listeners who are not familiar with this. This means one brand is developing a system, and other brands from the Volkswagen Group are using that system, and you're responsible for the entry level infotainment systems. So
Correct,
I wonder
correct.
which brands and which cars use your infotainment system. Is it only Skoda, or are there other brands involved in this?
Yeah, of course, you can find it in Skoda, but also in the Volkswagen cars, volume segment, Seat cars, and we can't forget that also VW commercial vehicles are using our system. Yeah.
Right. So I assume that the work you are doing at the moment within the entry-level infotainment system is affecting millions and millions of drivers every year, right?
Yeah, correct.
So I want to learn more about what can I expect as a customer when I buy a Volkswagen car with the entry-level system. What is the features I can expect?
Mm-hmm. We have in our series cars the third generation of this low-level infotainment, where we are offering displays 6.5 inch, 8, and currently 9.2 inches as well. When we are talking about the entry level, as I said, related to the DAB features which we have currently, we are offering the slideshow, we are offering the DLS Plus. We have already the seamless linking between FM and DAB. And yeah, we are working further. Nowadays, we are developing already the fourth generation, which is the UNECE compliant. And of course, for end customers, we are bringing even bigger displays. Already in this low-level segment, we are coming with the DAB linking, which is known already from the higher systems.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic. So the major question is always, how many tuners will you have in this car?
Yeah, when we started 10 years ago, it's more than 10 years ago, with the first generation of module infotainment, we had just only single DAB tuner, where we had no seamless. It was really annoying, I have to say. No background activities, and just DLS was there, and that was it. Yeah, step by step, we grew up also with this entry level. And currently, we are talking about the at least two tuner systems with background activities, of course. And as I said, the slideshow or also FIG2 extended labels are implemented in our low-level cars, or low-level infotainment.
Fantastic. So to sum it up, even in the low segment infotainment systems, you get a bunch of DAB Plus features, which is a great achievement over the last years. So coming back or stepping back from the technical point of view, focusing a little bit more on the customer side. Mm-hmm. From your experience, how important is radio for the Skoda customers?
Yeah, definitely is the cornerstone for entertainment, as well for news. But we don't forget that we are offering also the web radio already for our customers and media connectivity. It means that we have the Bluetooth, we have the wireless CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, and of course the Bluetooth and USB-C type connectivity.
And as I'm involved in the UX guidelines a little bit from WorldDAB, I wonder how your radio systems are designed from a user perspective. So how is radio integrated in the user interface of your system?
Yeah. We started with the hard keys, that you had to really hard key the button, you press the radio and you have it. And then, you switch between the FM, AM, DAB. But of course, the situation currently on the market is a little bit different. Everybody wants to have touch. Everybody wants to have glass design. And of course, also the HMI, the UX must change a little bit. Therefore, we are a little bit leaving this hard key, let's say, trend. And we have currently the soft key, we call it, where you press the audio and you have the radio content available. What's very good to mention, is that we have the tiles that you can make a shortcut to your radio content. And this is pretty easy as well for the end customer to find.
Yeah, this is fantastic, since we learned earlier this morning from the BBC study that effortless user experience is key for customer satisfaction.
Yep.
Finally, since time is almost over, I have a question about markets. So from your Skoda point of view, are there special markets where you see special interest in DAB+ fitted cars?
Yeah, definitely. We are talking with the regions, and for example, the latest which we got as some demand from the region was from the Balkan countries, and they not to have just only the option that they can buy DAB, they are going further, and they request is if the DAB could be also mandatory like we have in EU already. And yeah, the demands are coming, yeah, definitely. And it's pretty nice that we can offer it.
Fantastic. So to wrap it up, even in the small cars, we have fantastic technologies. We have user interfaces which make it easy to use radio for the drivers. And we have strong demands also outside of the EECC, outside of the EU, for DAB+ equipped cars. So I learned a lot. Thanks, Vlastimil, for this session. And that's all from our side, and back to the studio.
Thank you, Martin. And especially thank you to Vlastimil. It's great to hear directly from the vehicle manufacturers about radio still being important to them. And our next session further proves that the... it further proves that the top automotive brands are very much focused on DAB and the many features it offers. Now, as a one-off, especially for this event, Nick Piggott, Project Director at RadioDNS, is here to give us an exclusive first look at the results from the WorldDAB RadioDNS Features Research. So, Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Louise. And we'll get straight into the presentation because, as Louise has said, this is the first time we're able to share with you the headlines of our presentation and our research. So let's have a look at what we found. And we started this research by going into more detail and more depth than we think we've ever done before in finding out about receiver functionality. We asked more than 90 questions, very specific questions, about the exact behaviour, functionality and user experience of vehicle radios. And we got responses back from 11 OEMs. It's not finished yet. We expect to get response back from more OEMs over time. But right now we have some really good insight into what's really in the market now. And the reason this is important is because although broadcasters individually and collectively have access to radios in their own cars, we've never really been able to create a picture of how radio is delivered and experienced by drivers in their own vehicles. And we want to use that information to spot the functionality gaps that we can easily bridge. So to put that into a kind of diagrammatic form, there are things that our broadcasters are doing today. They're providing functionality, they're providing content that isn't reaching anything useful in the receiver. So that's wasted effort on the broadcaster side. And similarly, the manufacturers are implementing functionality in their receivers that the broadcasters aren't supporting, and manufacturers are wondering why things aren't working as they expect them to. And our job is to see if through this research we can align those two things a little better without having to do any heavy work like changing standards or changing infrastructure. And what we found from our research is that we can more or less group things into the responses into three groups. We found a set of attributes and functionalities that were common to almost all receivers. Then we found a set where there was almost polar difference in implementation between the receivers. Half of them did things one way, half of them did things the other way. And then we found a set of receivers that did things very distinctively, very uniquely. So let's look at the things that are common across all receivers. And the great news is it's all the important things. All the things that we've identified from all of our user research seem to be being done consistently across all the receivers. So almost all the receivers now show all the radio stations together in one alphabetical list, which we know massively helps with navigation. And that you have buttons, either hard keys or soft keys, that you can navigate through stations with. We know that the spurious information about the DAB channel or frequency information that doesn't help listeners at all isn't presented. And we know that the text information is generally shown. We learned, quite unexpectedly I think, that there's really widespread support for a functionality called DL+. Most receivers support it, not many broadcasters provide that, and we'll talk about that in a second. And we also found out things like the extent to which visual information is supported, and that important functionality like hard linking and announcements are also implemented. So let's look at the interesting set. The interesting set are the 50-50 set. This is where there seem to be almost polar opposite implementations of functionality in digital radio. So we have some receivers that do bring together FM and DAB into one single list of stations, but we found as many receivers still keep them under two separate lists, one for FM, one for DAB. About half the receivers can show a station logo, about half can't. Most of the receivers use RadioDNS or some other standardized way of acquiring the logo, but a lot are still requiring third-party databases, and we heard earlier how that can cause problems with radio station logos going wrong, which is frustrating and disappointing both for listeners and for broadcasters. But the good news is a lot of those receivers can get the right logos if you're transmitting them over DAB SPI, much as Glenn described earlier alongside that Arkiva trial of transmitting logos over the air. And that also means those logos stay updated automatically. Something curious we did find that we didn't expect to find is that DLS text, that's the text information that's transmitted by radio stations, is available to all drivers, but in more receivers than we expected, it's truncated. Actually, it's not possible for the driver to see all of the text information. So that's something to bear in mind as a broadcaster, that there may be constraints on that. And it's a good question to manufacturers about why that is happening, what is stopping them from showing all the text. And as you heard just a second ago from the guys at Skoda and Cariad, the number of receivers and tuners in a receiver is increasing. Most receivers now have access to multiple tuners, and that creates a much better user experience. We get into a few more differences. Ensemble names are shown in some receivers, they aren't shown in others. Where there's visual information, broadcasters need to think about providing a nighttime mode that's less glary and less bright in the cockpit if drivers are driving at nighttime. But some receivers do that automatically by dimming the visual. A lot of receivers, a lot more than we expected, are implementing program information showing the current and next program that's on air if it's being provided by the broadcaster. And we were also reassured to find that all the traffic information is being properly handled. In most receivers, alarms certainly are switched on all of them by default. A couple of things that will probably disappoint broadcasters. At the moment, we don't see very widespread implementation of soft linking, which is quite a useful function for a lot of broadcasters. And similarly, the new functionality to support radio stations that aren't on 24 hours a day isn't very widely implemented at the moment, but that is a relatively new functionality, so that situation may change. And then finally, we look at that set of receivers that did something unique and made us raise an eyebrow a little bit. So we found some reports of receivers where not only are they using third-party databases for logos, they're using third-party databases for the station names and the station lists, which is quite a curious behaviour and certainly something we probably want to go back to ask those manufacturers why they're having to do that. We are still finding some receivers where the navigation sorts stations in ways that probably make sense to an engineer but aren't so great for a user. And we did find receivers that whilst they can support visuals, they can't do it over a method called packet mode, which is an important way of being able to transmit visual information in some countries. We also found receivers that don't show the pictures in the right aspect ratio. They make them square. It's nice for the Instagram generation. It's not so great if you are creating your visuals in a different aspect ratio. So there are some things where we'll probably want to go back to those specific manufacturers and say, could you tell us a little bit more about why your radio is so differentiated and so unique in its behaviour against all the others? We didn't think it was right to ask the manufacturers too much about their future plans. We've asked them very specifically about what's on the market today because we know that everything else is potentially confidential. But the two things that were offered to us quite freely in a kind of comment section were, we will support station logos better. We'll make sure that they're supported over the air with DAB and that they can be updated remotely if they're being provided by broadcasters. That's fantastic news. And generally, a sense of we are prepared to invest in more functionality for radio if we get broadcaster support. So that was really positive and kind of unprompted feedback. So to conclude, kind of taking 3 points out of this, to take primarily back to broadcasters about what they should change to realign and close that gap a bit. Use DL+. The support of it on the receivers is much, much greater than we expected it to be. So have a look at how you can transmit that. Similarly, the visual support is quite widespread, but broadcasters aren't really paying attention to the aesthetic and the visual design and the quality of what they're transmitting over the air, and that seems to be a missed opportunity. And the last thing is, and I know it's a reiteration and a repetition of things that we say a lot, get the station logos right. Make them available over the air using DAB SPI and RadioDNS so that manufacturers have the best chance of presenting your radio station in the best possible way in the dashboard. So that's what we found from our research. We want to thank all of the OEMs who replied and those OEMs who we are pretty certain will reply in the future. There is a lot more detail in this research, as you can imagine, with over 900 responses. So we're going to be putting together a dedicated session in September where we will work through this in a bit more detail whilst protecting the anonymity that we promised to the OEMs so they could be frank with their answers to us. That's the output of our research project. It's been great to share it with you. I'd like to thank Rosemary, who's worked alongside me on this project to get this going. And we look forward to sharing more with you in September. Louise.
Thank you, Nick. Some really interesting points coming out there. You can find out more about the research. You can download all of the presentations from today, and you can find out how to watch again all of the output from today on the WorldDAB website. That's at www.worlddab.org. Right, coming up next, Laurence is joined by his colleague Caroline Grazé, Managing Director for Radioplayer Germany. They're going to tell us how Radioplayer have taken the principles of the WorldDAB UX guidelines and brought them to life via a hybrid radio app. And I think, Caroline, you're about to start for us, so over to you.
Moment, but I'm just going to start talking, and thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Caroline Grazé. I'm the Managing Director from Radioplayer in Germany, and together with Laurence, who's in the studio, we would like to tell you a little bit about what we do, how we do it, and why it is so great to have Radioplayer work on hybrid devices. So over to you, Laurence, please start.
Thanks, Caroline. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to do a brief introduction to Radioplayer for those of you that don't know much about us. We are unique in this space in that we are non-profit and we are supported and backed only by radio broadcasters. So you can be sure we are acting strategically on their behalf. We're growing quickly. We're in 14 countries currently. Most of those are in Europe, but also Canada, which is really important to us. And last year, the Netherlands, Sweden and France all joined Radioplayer. Our main aim now on the broadcaster's behalf is to keep radio strong in car dashboards of the future. And to do that, we form collaborative partnerships with car companies. And we currently have two brilliant partners. We have Cariad representing VW Group, and you've heard from the fantastic Martin Koch and his team already. And then in March, we were really proud to announce a partnership with BMW Group. And between them, these guys represent about a third of all car sales across Europe. And what's important to us in these partnerships is really about keeping radio strong in the dashboard. It's about the broadcast or hybrid radio experience that sits behind the radio button. How do we help our listeners continue to choose radio in what is becoming an increasingly competitive dashboard environment? Now, the reason that competition is growing is partly because cars are becoming connected, but also because of new technologies like Google's Android Automotive operating system. We've already heard about the importance of that. At Radioplayer, we started working with Android Automotive almost 2 years ago now, and we did that for two reasons. Firstly, we wanted to make sure that the standard radio experience described in Android Automotive for broadcast was as good as it could be, and then it becomes hybrid. We think that's critical. And as part of that, we wanted to learn about the system itself. So we've developed a hybrid application in Android Automotive, and those learnings have been put into a report. We've made that available to Google and other partners, including WorldDAB and NAB Pilot. But it's the design and creation of that hybrid application that I want to talk about now in terms of a case study. And to be clear, it's about the radio button. This hybrid app is designed for use by car manufacturers in their own broadcast experience. I should say that in the development of our hybrid app, we've worked with a fantastic Tier 1 partner in Panasonic Automotive Systems Europe and used their automotive-grade tuner hardware in the development. And you'll see a bit more of that later. But when you've got a blank canvas and you're starting to think about developing a hybrid app in Android Automotive, there are a few things you need to think about. For us, it's about putting good design principles at the heart of this, so test, redesign, a user-centric approach. We also need to consider some of the design guidelines that Android Automotive have, and also those that each car manufacturer have as well. The foundation of our design principles were taken from the WorldDAB UX guidelines, and that's what we're going to cover in the case study. And at the heart of the guidelines, they describe that a good hybrid radio experience is what creates, frankly, the best experience for the user. So let's just run through each of those at a time. First of all, on the design side, these are just some early design screen grabs you'll see from the early part of last year. And when you're doing these early designs, you try and play with a few things. We looked at station carousels. We looked at being able to search, for example, by writing on a touch screen, and different positions for icons. Some of these we discarded straight away. Some of them we tested, redesigned, and iterated those. Now, the WorldDAB User Experience Guidelines were founded on user testing and use cases that we learnt from that. We take the same approach in our app design, and we've tested the user interface on the road, and also we've simulated a driving experience in the office. You can see there with the steering wheel, pedals and so on, and you learn a huge amount about how intuitive the design is, and also about the different positions of certain icons and so on, and the features that people really value. Now, the other thing that we looked at, of course, was the Android Automotive's own design guidelines. There are things in here about typography, colour, layout, and they have their own recommendations on driver distraction as well, and how you can minimise that. And that, for example, looks at the driving state and what you can show there, and also the state when you're not driving and what more you can show in terms of features and functionality. So we've taken all this into consideration. But I did want to just run through a few of the key WorldDAB guidelines, and these are in the red bars at the top to show how our hybrid app works with those. So first of all, I want to be able to easily set a station as a preset. We use the heart icon, which you can see on the left. These are screen grabs from our hybrid app. If you press that, the station logo will appear immediately at the bottom under favorites, and you can very easily reorder or delete and manage your favourites via the Manage button there. I'm going to hand back to Caroline now to cover a few other aspects.
So, of course, what we wanted to tell you about is how we achieve the goal that is the most important one for the listener, which is, what am I listening to? I need to know. I need to navigate simply through the UX, and I need to know about the station I'm listening to. A logo helps, of course. So what you can see here is logos, descriptions, program information that we achieve. And the good thing about our service is that we get it directly from the broadcasters. We have a lot of metadata going around: the DAB bearers, the FM bearers, descriptions, geolocations, frequencies that they operate on, logos in various formats. And our most important job is actually to make sure that those are always up to date and complete. And we make a lot of work, we put a lot of work into scanning our database on a daily basis and looking for example, logos that cannot be read on a small scale, missing descriptions, missing keywords. So we really are proud to have the best possible radio data. Helps thankfully, thanks to the helps to our broadcasters. And if Laurence hopefully continues to the next slides, which I don't see, this also, of course, includes phonetics. We have a large database of phonetics synonyms. Thank you. Synonyms for our stations. I can tell you that in Germany alone, we have 2,000 stations running on Radioplayer. And we are on a daily basis making the database of over 10,000 phonetics synonyms for these 2,000 stations even better. So that even if you don't know that the station is officially called 103.4 Berlin Hit Radio RTL, you just say whatever comes to your mind. And we also regularly scan those voice requests that didn't result in what the user wanted to hear, and then we add upon that database as well. So, but back to Laurence, who will continue and show you about how that works.
Thanks, Caroline. The other core element of the user experience guidelines is about creating a great hybrid experience. And at the moment, in Android Automotive, it's not possible. It doesn't describe a standard hybrid experience, but we've brought it to life in our app. Of course, that's really important to have a single A to Z station list, but also the use case, if you're listening to DAB, you move out of DAB coverage and you want to continue listening, can you switch over to IP and stream the content so you never lose your station? I've got a very short video demo here on the Panasonic hardware showing this in action, so I'm just going to roll that now. I'm now going to disconnect the broadcast antenna, and there'll be a short delay, and then the signal will switch to IP. The short delay is because we currently do hard switching. Seamless switching is coming soon. So there you go, a really important part of bringing those guidelines to life. And then just finally, the next steps for us with regards to our app are we're going to be adding podcasts and on-demand content, thousands and thousands of pieces of great content from our radio broadcasters, as well as live station recommendations for a bit more of a personalised experience, and recommendations for podcasts on demand a bit later. So just to finish up and summarise, we firmly believe that Android Automotive has to describe as a minimum radio experience a hybrid one. It's got to be based on simple user-centric design, just like the WorldDAB UX guidelines. Great metadata is going to power that great experience, and broadcasters need to be in control and own that metadata. Our hybrid app is available to any car companies that are interested to use it as their own broadcast experience, and we hope this has been a useful and interesting case study. Thank you very much.
It was indeed. Thank you very much, Laurence, and to Caroline as well. A great example there of the possible made practical. Again, if you want more information on the work of the WorldDAB User Experience Group that created the guidelines that we've just been hearing about, you can go to our website, www.worlddab.org/auto. Now, Laurence, we saw in that little video there the screen in the car, and you know, Caroline talked a little bit about what's possible. The information on that screen comes from using broadcaster to metadata. But can you tell us a little bit more about that? Why is it so important for broadcasters to get it right?
Well, I think we heard earlier about some examples that we've seen in some car dashboards where the wrong metadata is being used and the wrong logo is being presented. It may be out of date, the information could be wrong. So the approach that we take at Radioplayer is that we get metadata direct from the broadcasters. So they upload it directly to us and we make it available on a single endpoint to car manufacturers. So they have confidence that it's official, it's direct from the broadcasters, and we monitor that to make sure it's of good quality. And if you don't do that, then you may have access to metadata that is wrong or not owned by the broadcasters. So we think that's critical, really important to a good experience.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Right, moving on, we've heard a lot today about collaboration, and we're very pleased to say that one of our close collaborations is with the National Association of Broadcasters in the US. They've recently updated their NAB Digital Dashboard Best Practices for Broadcasters document, and here to tell us about those updates is NAB's VP of Advanced Engineering, David Layer. David, over to you.
Well, hello, everybody. It's good to be here. I want to thank Bernie and her team for inviting me. I'm honored to be on this panel. I've had the pleasure of working with many of the folks we're hearing from today, not just this panel, really, but the whole morning. And it's really an honor for me to be here. I agreed with Joe D'Angelo earlier. He talked about how nice it would be to have this event in person next year. I agree completely, and I hope I get to see many of you in Las Vegas in October when we bring the NAB show back to life. So I'm going to start off this morning by taking you back to 2017. I'm showing you here a picture of from the radio show, which took place in Dallas that year. On the dais there, you see Fred Jacobs of Jacobs Media. He was introducing the first version of the Digital Dashboard Best Practices Report. The goal was to educate broadcasters about what's wrong with metadata and how to fix it. So the core of this report was a metadata audit, which was conducted by Fred and Paul Jacobs. They went out and parked their cars, 3 different markets. They looked at the performance of the broadcaster and delivering metadata to the receivers. So this was the core of our report. We also had a big contribution from on the engineering side from Glenn Walden, formerly with CBS Radio. And we just explained we explained the problem to broadcasters and how they can improve things. So let me just share with you a couple quick snippets from the original report. This is an example of the results from the metadata audit. Green is good, red is bad. What we discovered was many broadcasters weren't taking advantage of what they had with respect to metadata. So the reason I'm talking about all this is yesterday we updated, and we've been updating our report. Yesterday we re-released it. We have new information on hybrid radio, and just let's slow down on the slides for just a second, please. We've got, this is part of our ongoing effort to help broadcasters do better in this regard. I'm showing you a slide now which just shows you the cover of the report. There's actually two documents. The main report, 29 pages. Then there's a summary report with just some key bullet lists for programming departments, for engineering departments, and then something new to this edition is a list of metadata service providers, which I'll show you in a second. And these are available on the NAB website. I've included some links here. I'm assuming that these slides will be distributed. So once you have these, you'll just be able to click on these links and go right to the documents. So here's just a couple of shots from inside the document. One thing we've done is we've talked about the distinction between static and dynamic metadata, making sure broadcasters understand that there's really two kinds. I'm hoping that some of you on at this meeting today may look at the report. Maybe you'll find that I could embellish it or something needs to be corrected. I would encourage you to reach out to me so we can do that. Here's just a quick shot of the service providers list that we compiled. Again, we would love to improve this list, make any corrections, add new service providers. We're eager to get as many service providers on here as we can. So please reach out to me if you think you can help in that regard. So there are really 5 key points in our document, which I'm going to cover now. First point, metadata support. It's more important than ever. And in the document, I'm able to provide some great, real life experiences. I was able to test drive an Audi A4 a couple months ago with the new hybrid radio that Audi is now offering here in the U.S. And I have been able to illustrate, how good it can look when broadcasters provide the proper information, and also how it doesn't look as good if they don't. Now, the key here, I thought too, was focusing on the favorite screen, because in the hybrid radio, the favorite screen is going to include sources, different sources, FM. In this case, in the U.S. here, FM, Sirius XM, and online radio are the examples I've shown in the picture on the bottom. And broadcasters need to understand that they are going to be on this screen with these other services, and they need to be looking just as good. Second point, many automakers are using in-vehicle databases now. I don't know that consumers are really aware of what's going on or that they really care. They just want to have that good user experience. But I don't think many broadcasters, as many as should be perhaps, are aware of this technology. And I think it's important because, this technology, it's great. It raises consumer expectations on what they're going to get with their radio listening experience. It really levels the playing field for the broadcasters that are not really ponying up to the bar yet when it comes to metadata. So it's helps them. There's another aspect, though, here, too, and that is that the broadcaster's metadata content might not be displayed. And I think that there's a need for more conversations between automakers and broadcasters regarding the use of the broadcaster-generated metadata content in these types of systems. So the next point is a point I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. Using RadioDNS is a good start to enhance the station's image. We provide some information on resources for using RadioDNS. Of course, full disclosure, I'm currently on the board. I'm actually the steering board chair of RadioDNS, so I'm also very excited about getting broadcasters interested in using this technology and understanding that it doesn't really cost them anything except the resources they expend to make use of it. And it's very important, and it's an easy way for them to get started. Fourth point is a similar point regarding AutoStage. AutoStage has hit the ground running with Mercedes. It's another service where if you talk to Xperia, they will explain to you that there are advantages to signing up with AutoStage directly. Again, it's not something that's going to cost broadcasters anything to do. So this is something we want to make sure people are aware of it, and that they do it. Lastly, is the point for broadcasters to be aware of the fact that now nonlinear content is available on these platforms. They can provide it. There's interactivity opportunities as well. I'm showing a slide here from a podcast that I was listening to in that A4 I was able to test drive. And this is the perfect example. I mean, broadcasters need to be doing this sort of thing as well. They want to reach listeners, not just with their linear content, but with nonlinear content. So they need to be thinking about that. So that's pretty much it for me today. The main point, I guess, is that NAB is keenly aware of the need for improved metadata from broadcasters, U.S. broadcasters, perhaps in particular, because there's so many of them, and it's such a varied group. The larger broadcast groups are doing great. We heard from Caroline Beasley earlier today. They're probably the poster child for, how to do it right. But there's 15,000 broadcasters here in the U.S., so we really need to continue to get the message out on what you need to do, how you need to do it. And I guess lastly, I'll just point out that I've had the opportunity to work with WorldDAB through a project that we're doing in the North American Broadcaster Association Radio Committee, which involves looking at the great in-car user experience work that WorldDAB has done and seeing how it fits the North American market. And mostly it does. It's been a good collaboration, and we're hopeful that later this year we will have a slimmed down, of course, version of that experience document for North American broadcasters, just so they understand, what's going on, and we can help improve radio listening in vehicles. So I'll stop there. Louise, back to you.
Thank you very much, David. And as David said, that document is now available on their website. That's www.nab.org. Now, as the title suggests, we really are WorldDAB, the forum where all the conversations on all parts of the digital radio in-car experience are held. Our members come from the broadcaster and vehicle manufacturing industries. But as we encompass everything related to enabling DAB+ in the car, we also count amongst our members the aftermarket device manufacturers. Now, as you may well be aware, after Norway, Switzerland will be the next country to switch off FM transmissions starting in 2022. We now have Ernst Werder in conversation with representatives from the Swiss auto supply chain. That's Jeremy Artsman of Exclusive Car Hi-Fi and Hans-Peter Saar from Robert Bosch. And they're going to tell us about how they're getting all drivers ready for the big FM switch off.
Hello. Used cars without DAB+, a critical point for digital switchover. A little later, I will introduce you to two companies. Hans-Peter from Bosch Car Service. Bosch operates over 90 independent support points in Switzerland. Hans-Peter is the manager responsible for the workshop concepts. Jeremy from Exclusive Car Hi-Fi. Exclusive Car Hi-Fi deals exclusively with multimedia equipment in cars. In this context, they have been dealing with DAB+ car upgrades for over 20 years. Besides other things, Jeremy is the product manager responsible for all technology around DAB+. Both support the switchover very actively. What do you need to be successful? You need business partners, such as importers for DAB+ retrofits who are more than box movers, professional electronic workshops, car importers and manufacturers who know their customers, as they can get their customers to upgrade their car to DAB+, of course, with the right marketing. The DAB+ upgrade could be a long-term customer loyalty program. You need a strong DAB marketing and a DAB installer training. 55% of all car drivers in Switzerland who listen to the radio in the car receives radio digitally. 99% of all cars sold in Switzerland in 2020 are equipped with DAB+. More than 400 DAB+ installers have already been trained. And one of the most important points, you need good DAB coverage, because the motorists are very sensitive about DAB+ reception. Jeremy, you told me in the early discussion that your company is one of the leading importers of B2B DAB retrofit products. Could you tell us the reason why?
Probably the main reason for that is that we have our own workshops, so we don't just import products, but we also install them, and we can test them ourselves. So this is one of our biggest plus points. And since most larger auto importers are our customers, it's usually very easy for us to get our hands on vehicles where we can test the products on, in order to ensure that the product is good and is fine. What's also worth mentioning is that our company is focusing on DAB+ for quite a long time. And since a couple of years, we do also offer workshops with our partners in the B2B area. Through all that, technical know-how has grown continuously, and through that, we are able to offer our customers a very unique service.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hans-Peter, Bosch got involved with retrofitting DAB+ at the very early stage. Why?
Yes, well, DAB+ retrofits are an interesting business model that fits very well into the Bosch Casso's world. And we recognized early which advantages DAB+ has over the analog FM radio standard. And we've been working in this area for several years with partners like Exclusive Car Hi-Fi. And we collaborate with Exclusive Car Hi-Fi because they are experts in this field of DAB+ and support our Bosch Casso's partners in a very supportive manner. And at the same time, we followed the topic early on and realized that the switch from FM to digital broadcasting via DAB+ would come sooner or later.
Thank you, Hans-Peter. Jeremy, DAB+ adapters are offered everywhere. Are these types of retrofit used a lot in the B2B sector?
Our B2B customers and partners, they're focusing more on the fully integrated solution. Having to mention that Switzerland, compared to a lot of other countries, have a very high standard of vehicles, meaning that the vehicles are more in the mid to high price segment. And also the end user, they don't want to see an adapter on the dashboard or mounted somewhere in the vehicle. So the end user, he wants to use his OEM radio like he's used to, and he wants to use his buttons on the steering wheel as he's used to. And for a lot of end users, it's also very important to have features like service following or dynamic labels. So they want to be able to see the song that's playing, who's the song by, and so on. And they want to see that on their screen, on the regular radio screen, and not on a small adapter screen.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hans-Peter, Jeremy mentioned earlier that most of the end customers do not prefer an adapter solution, but a full integration. What's your experience?
Well, yes, our experience is actually full integration is very popular indeed. However, an adapter solution is a sensible and also affordable alternative as well, and especially for older vehicles. Our Bosch Car Service partners offer both adapter solutions and full integration. The prices are varying, like it depends on whether the equipment is visible or not visible and which additional functions are included as well. You can expect costs starting at around 250 Swiss francs.
Thank you, Hans-Peter. Jeremy, what additional advantages does full integration offer, and can vintage vehicles also converted to DAB+?
So with a fully integrated solution, as I've mentioned, the DAB tuner will be installed in a way that the customer can't see it. So the dashboard is free of any visible adapters, meaning that the solution itself is mounted within the dashboard or behind the OEM radio or underneath the center console whatsoever. Also, as I've mentioned, is that the fully integrated solution can be controlled over the OEM radio. So therefore, there's no adapter needed for that. For vintage cars or for old timers, as you've mentioned, we also have developed a solution where you can mount or install DAB+ in a way that the vehicle doesn't lose its vintage status or its historic status. And I also have to mention at this point that we do also offer solutions for boats or even for bikes.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hans-Peter, you told me that your company has been involved in trainings for DAB+ upgrades from a very early stage, and that you have offered your Bosch partners the opportunity to participate in such trainings several times. What was your motivation?
Well, good training is basically very important to us, and it is also part of our quality standard within the Bosch Car Service world. And that's why we also test if the Bosch Car Service partners do their trainings regularly. And DAB+ retrofits, especially full integrations, are not easy to install. The knowledge needed to install FM radios is unfortunately not enough. So we attach great importance to our Bosch Car Service partners being able to advise their customers professionally and offer individual DAB+ solutions. This includes not only technical knowledge about the DAB+, but also knowledge about the DAB+ network distribution in Switzerland, as well as where and which DAB+ radio programs can be received.
Thank you, Hans-Peter. Thank you very much of both of you for taking your time for this conversation.
And thank you from us in the studio to all of our speakers from Switzerland as well. It's time now for our next audience Q&A session. As before, please leave as many questions as you'd like for the speakers on the message wall, and we'll endeavour to get to as many of them as we can in the time allowed. And we've got some great questions coming through already. Nick, let me put the first one to you, actually. Is the 50-50 split on luxury end versus mass market vehicles?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that'll be one of the things that we look at when we drive down into that next level of detail in September. Broadly speaking, probably. It's inevitable that a luxury vehicle has a more capable and more functional radio than one that's in the mid-market, but that's not necessarily the case across the board. And what we'll look for as we get into the detail is the things that seem out of line. I talked about that a little bit in my last slide of we found some receivers that had some behaviours that were very different to the others. And when we get down into the layers, we'll go, well, actually, we're seeing a mid-market receiver here that's displaying a behaviour that's very different to what we would expect. So that will become more obvious. But I would have said, yeah, in summary, probably that is an obvious split, is radios that have a lot of money behind them and radios that are in a more kind of mid-range
Lovely. Right, I'm going to try and get through a question to everybody. So let's go to Vlastimil next. What recommendation would you make relating to driver distraction?
Driver distraction is, of course, a big topic in the vehicle. And we address this with the new guidelines in the UX guidelines from WorldDAB, just focusing on a slideshow and the slideshow best practices in order to have rich features in the slideshow, but do not distract the driver. And this is about, as mentioned, colors, night mode, the frequency where the images changes, and all this stuff the broadcasters should apply to not distract the drivers from driving while consuming and enjoying the slideshow.
Thank you. Let me give you a different question, Vlastimil, because we've had one come in for you from Ernst in Switzerland, who wants to know, has Skoda also implemented TPEG in DAB Plus radios?
Yeah, unfortunately, we are not implementing TPEG at all. We are currently focused on online traffic, that we are collecting the information from the backends, and the TPEG is not supported by us. Yeah, that's pity, but it's not.
Okay. Caroline, one for you now. What are the next steps now you've created that working demo?
Okay. Well, of course, we are gathering more and more information regarding the way the user experiences with it, what can be done better, how the voice integration can be added to that, how we can add even more metadata than just now playing informations, etc. And then we hopefully offer it as a white label solution to any car manufacturer who is not his own audio entertainment team, just like Martin does, and who needs a working, good, well thought out hybrid radio in his car. So everybody basically. So contact us.
Ernst, one for you next. If you had to guide any other markets, what would you say they need to get right with aftermarket devices?
Well, when you will be like Switzerland, I'm sorry when I say that, then you must do two things, I think, two important things. You must speak with the importers or with the manufacturers, and you must, because they have a lot of customers who need in the future a DAB in the old cars they drive already. Of course, the importers or the manufacturer would like to sell a new car, but as we know, the owner of a car is the most 6 to 9 years they hold to the old cars. And so they must do a change from FM to a DAB+. And as I mentioned in the presentation, the approach will be that you say to the importer or the manufacturer, look, when you go with your customer and you provide them with good information how they will change from FM to DAB+, then you can do also a very good relationship with your customers, because when you do the right job and install retrofits DAB properly in the car, the customer will come back to you and will buy in the next few years a car by you. And the second is that you must train the installers. That is very, very important, because a lot of installers, a lot of car installers or car garages, they do not know exactly what will be to install a DAB Plus in the car, because they know FM, that's easy. You plug in a radio and then it works properly, but DAB Plus, it's very, very different and it's very difficult.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernst. I think I'm afraid that's all the questions, all the time we've got for questions, sadly. Let's just do a few quick shout-outs that we've had from people who've been in contact with us. So Professor Mehmet Kesim from Turkey on Twitter, he's been highlighting the new research by the BBC that we heard about before lunch. Thank you to Roman Kropacek in the Czech Republic. He's been busy posting about the event on Twitter as well. Also, hello to Gefis Meinung joining us today from Austria. share, and a quick mention to Christian Winter and Robert Brunn, who are also watching the event today. Thanks you to our guests in the studio. Thanks to all of you for joining in today. What a great session that was. Time for a quick break now before we commence our final session of the day. We hope you've enjoyed the conference so far. We'll be sending out an event summary, the speakers' presentations, and a link to the recording of all of today's talks after the conclusion of the event. But for now, have yourselves a short break, and we'll see you back here in a few minutes for the fourth and final session of the day.